I think I didn't do anything wrong, just wanted to prove I could stay friends with my ex. It wasn't supposed to be dramatic, until he showed up at our party, punched my husband in front of everyone, and then said something that made the whole room go silent. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. When I first texted Ryan about helping with the charity event, I really thought it was harmless. He'd done design work before, and my boss always said I needed a creative eye on my projects. I didn't even ask Eli first. Why would I? We were all adults. Besides, Ryan and I had dated years ago, and we ended things on decent terms. It wasn't some secret. Everyone knew, including my husband. When I told Eli that night over dinner, he set his fork down slowly. "Ryan Vale?" he asked. I said yes, like it was no big deal. He didn't say anything for a few seconds. Then, "You really think that's a good idea?" I laughed. "You make it sound like he's dangerous. He's just helping out." "He's your ex, Nadia." "So what? You trust me, don't you?" He didn't answer right away, which irritated me. "Of course I do," he said finally. "I just don't see the point of inviting old complications back into your life." I rolled my eyes. "It's work, not a reunion." Still, he looked unconvinced, and the silence that followed annoyed me more than any argument could. Later, when I told my mom, she sided with me immediately. "Eli's always been a bit possessive," she said. "Ryan's polite, well-mannered. I always liked him." That comforted me. My mother adored Ryan when we dated. She never thought Eli was ambitious enough for me. Hearing her say it again gave me a quiet satisfaction I didn't want to admit. Ryan started messaging me the next day about color schemes and catering options. The conversation stayed professional, mostly. Once he joked, "You haven't changed a bit, still bossing everyone around." I replied with a laughing emoji, nothing more. Still, it felt nice to be remembered fondly. Eli came home early that night. He saw my phone light up on the counter, Ryan's name clear on the screen. "He texts you now?" he asked. "It's work," I said, reaching for it too quickly. He gave a small nod, the kind that said he didn't believe me but didn't want to argue. "Just make sure this stays about the event." "Of course," I said, trying to sound calm. "You're acting like I'm sneaking around." He sighed. "I'm just asking for boundaries, Nadia." That word, boundaries, always rubbed me the wrong way. It made everything sound like rules, restrictions, something to push against. A few days later, Ryan and I met at the venue to finalize decorations. It was bright and loud, people moving chairs and hanging banners. He showed up wearing the same smirk I remembered from when we were younger, confident and careless. "This is déjà vu," he said. "You, ordering everyone around. Me, trying to keep up." I laughed. Maybe some things never change. When I told Eli that evening that Ryan had been a huge help, his tone went flat. "I'm glad he's useful." I frowned. "You could at least pretend to be supportive." "I'd be supportive if it didn't feel like you were enjoying his attention." "That's ridiculous." "Then tell me why you didn't mention meeting him alone." The argument went in circles. I said he was overthinking. He said I was avoiding the point. Finally, he gave up, saying, "Do what you want. You always do." That line stuck with me all night. I hated how calm he sounded, how sure he was that I wouldn't listen. The following week, as I sent out invitations for my upcoming birthday, I hesitated over Ryan's name. Then I added it anyway. It felt childish not to. When Eli saw the final guest list, he froze. "You invited him here? To our house?" "It's not just our house. It's my birthday," I said lightly. "He's not your friend, Nadia. He's a reminder." I crossed my arms. "You're making this dramatic. I'm mature enough to have an ex at a party without it meaning anything." He shook his head. "I hope you're right." When I told Mom about the fight, she laughed. "Eli's insecure because Ryan's successful, that's all. He'll calm down once he sees how innocent it is." Her confidence soothed me again, the way it always did. I started repeating her words to myself. Innocent, harmless, mature. They sounded reasonable, solid. Ryan texted me the night before the party. "Still on for tomorrow? Should I bring that playlist you liked?" I typed back, "Sure, keep it classy though." He replied with a wink emoji. I stared at the screen longer than I should have before locking my phone. The next day, Eli spent the morning setting up lights in the backyard while I arranged flowers. He didn't mention Ryan once. The silence was unnerving. Around noon, my coworker Lena arrived early to help. When I mentioned that Ryan might drop by, she raised an eyebrow. "You really think that's smart?" I frowned. "Why not? It's a party. Everyone's invited." She shrugged. "I just don't want to see you end up in one of those messy social media stories." I laughed, but her tone made me uneasy. By evening, the yard looked perfect. String lights glowing, tables lined with food, soft music floating from the speakers. People started arriving, laughing, hugging, handing me gifts. Then Ryan walked in like he belonged there. He looked the same as always, confident, slightly smug. Eli saw him from across the yard, his jaw tightening. Ryan handed me a bottle of wine and said, "Still throwing the best parties." I smiled too brightly. "Old habits." He looked past me at Eli. "You must be proud. She's still the same perfectionist I remember." Eli nodded once. "She's consistent, that's for sure." The air thickened for a moment before guests pulled me away to take pictures. I laughed for the camera, but my stomach was knotted. I told myself I'd done nothing wrong. This was just an awkward coincidence between adults. Later that night, as I was cleaning up, Eli came over quietly. "He didn't need to be here," he said. I looked at him, defensive. He was polite. "You're the one making it weird." He studied my face for a long time. "I hope you're right, Nadia. Because if I'm not wrong, we're about to have a much bigger problem than an awkward guest list." He walked back inside without another word, leaving me standing under the flickering lights, wondering why something that had felt so harmless now felt like a fuse I had just lit. The week after the party, everything at home felt off. Eli didn't mention Ryan again, but the silence between us had changed shape. It wasn't angry, just heavy. Every time I tried to start a normal conversation, it slid back into small talk, the kind people use when they're halfway out the door emotionally. At work, Ryan stopped by my office with coffee. "Don't tell your husband," he joked. "Wouldn't want to cause another scene." I laughed, too loud, pretending it didn't bother me. He leaned against the desk, easy and confident. "You handled that party perfectly," he said. "You've always been good at smoothing things over." It was meant as a compliment, but it felt like a test. "Eli's just protective," I said, shrugging. "Protective," Ryan repeated, smirking. "Or territorial." I smiled, avoiding the question. When he left, my coworker Lena poked her head in. "You're playing with fire," she said quietly. "I'm not doing anything wrong," I said. She raised an eyebrow. "Neither is he yet." That word, yet, stuck with me all afternoon. Still, I answered Ryan's messages when they came. He had a way of talking that made me feel seen, like he remembered versions of me I'd forgotten. He'd text about work, then slip in something personal. "You still wear that perfume I liked?" Or "I miss how you used to overthink everything." I'd roll my eyes and ignore the flirting, but part of me liked it. When I got home that night, Eli was on the couch reading. I told him Ryan had stopped by just to be transparent, his hands stilled on the page. "Why?" "Work." He wanted to discuss the event. Eli nodded slowly. "And that required coffee deliveries now?" "Don't do that," I said sharply. "You're twisting everything I say." He closed the book. "You're letting him back in, Nadia. You don't even see it." I threw my bag down. "You're paranoid. I can't even breathe without you looking for an angle." He stood up, calm, but distant. "I'm not paranoid. I'm just tired of being second place in my own marriage. I didn't know what to say. He walked past me and into the kitchen. I heard the kettle click on, that soft, final sound that ended the conversation. 2 days later, Ryan suggested lunch. Just to talk about the charity wrap-up, he said. My treat. I hesitated, but said yes. It was midweek. Harmless enough. We met at a small restaurant downtown, somewhere bright and public. I told myself that made it okay. He arrived late, still charming, still effortless. Over salads, he started reminiscing about our college days. You remember that weekend at the lake? He asked. You swore you'd never date someone serious. You wanted adventure. I laughed. People grow up. Some do, he said. Some just stop trying. The words landed too precisely. I felt defensive before I knew why. Eli's steady, I said. That's what I needed. He tilted his head. Needed or settled for. I put down my fork. You're out of line. He smiled softly. Relax. I'm just teasing. You used to love when I did that. I wanted to leave, but pride kept me seated. When the bill came, he said, Let me take care of it. I owe you for the party invite. You don't owe me anything, I said, standing. Maybe not, he said, but you still light up the room the same way. I didn't reply. When I got home that evening, Eli was working on his laptop. I sat beside him, trying to sound casual. Ryan and I had lunch today, just to finalize some things. He didn't look up. Was it productive? Don't start, I said. I'm being honest. He closed his laptop slowly. Honesty isn't the same as respect. That stung more than it should have. You're twisting everything again. No, he said quietly. You are. The next morning, I saw the photo. Ryan had tagged me in a post, lunch meeting with my favorite partner in crime. There was a winking emoji and a photo of our plates. My stomach dropped. I untagged myself immediately, but it was too late. Lena messaged me 5 minutes later. What are you doing? Eli didn't say anything about it for 2 days, and the silence felt worse than any confrontation. Then, one evening, while we were cleaning up after dinner, he said, I saw that picture. I froze. It wasn't like that. He kept wiping the counter. You don't even see what you're doing, do you? It's nothing, I said. He's a friend. He looked at me then, tired, calm, but with something behind his eyes that I hadn't seen before. You're daring me to walk away, he said quietly. And one day, I will. I opened my mouth to argue, but nothing came out. Later that night, lying in bed, I thought about that sentence. One day, I will. It sounded less like a threat and more like a promise. The next morning, I texted Ryan. Maybe we shouldn't talk for a while. He replied almost instantly. Sure. Hope I didn't cause trouble. I typed back, You didn't, but didn't send it. I just stared at the blinking cursor until the screen went dark. When I went downstairs, Eli was drinking coffee, ready to leave for work. He looked peaceful, distant. I'll be late tonight, he said. I asked, Where are you going? He smiled faintly. Nowhere I have to explain. I wanted to be angry, but I couldn't. I just stood there, watching him leave, realizing he meant every word from the night before. He wasn't waiting for another reason to go. He was just waiting for the right moment. And for the first time, I didn't feel confident. I felt exposed, as if every little excuse I'd made had been building towards something I could no longer control. By the time our joint birthday rolled around in early September, I convinced myself things were finally settling down. Eli was quieter, yes, but he hadn't mentioned Ryan in weeks. I took his silence as peace, when really it was just distance. The party was supposed to be small, a backyard gathering, close friends, family, a few co-workers. I wanted something warm and easy, but deep down, I also wanted to prove that everyone could coexist, that I hadn't done anything wrong. That morning, I caught Eli on the porch, stringing up lights. "You sure about having everyone here?" he asked. "Of course," I said, tying a ribbon around a vase. "It's just a party." He didn't answer. The wind moved through the trees and the bulbs flickered. "Don't make it another test, Nadia," he said finally. "You already know how this ends." I ignored the warning. By the time the guests started arriving, the house looked beautiful. Soft music, candles, trays of food. I was determined for it to feel normal. Lena brought wine and hugged me. "You looked nervous," she whispered. "I'm fine," I said too quickly. Then Ryan showed up. No warning, no text. Just walked in like it was his house. He had that confident grin that used to charm everyone. "Hope I'm not late," he said, handing me a bottle of champagne. My stomach twisted. "You weren't on the RSVP list," I said, half joking. He winked. "Guess I like surprises." Eli noticed immediately. He didn't come over, he just stood by the grill, his jaw tight, hands still. My mother, of course, beamed when she saw Ryan. "Oh, it's been ages," she said, hugging him like a long-lost son. "You look wonderful. Eli, doesn't he look wonderful?" Eli just nodded. "Sure." The tension was invisible to most people at first. Ryan moved through the crowd easily, cracking jokes, refilling drinks, charming everyone who didn't know the history. Every now and then, I'd catch Eli watching him, expression unreadable. I kept telling myself it would blow over. During dinner, Ryan sat across from me. "You always throw the best parties," he said loudly. "No wonder Eli never wants to host. He can't compete." People laughed. I forced a smile. "Stop," I said softly, but he didn't. He leaned forward. "Relax, Nadia. It's a compliment." Eli looked up from his plate, voice calm but firm. "That's enough, Ryan." Ryan grinned. "Just joking, man." Marianne, my mother, chimed in. "Oh, don't be so serious, Eli. You know Ryan's humor." Lena shot me a look from across the table, eyes saying, "End this now." I poured myself another glass of wine instead. After dinner, people started drifting toward the backyard fire pit. I thought maybe we'd escape the worst of it. Then Ryan found me near the kitchen. "You know he still hates me," he said, leaning too close. "He doesn't hate you," I said, stepping back. "He just doesn't like surprises." Ryan smirked. "He doesn't like that you still talk to me." I froze. "You need to stop." He tilted his head. "Why? You keep answering." Before I could respond, Eli walked in. His eyes went from me to Ryan. "What's going on?" "Nothing," I said quickly. "We're just talking." Ryan smiled. "Old friends catching up. You know how it is." Eli nodded slowly. "Yeah, I know exactly how it is." Something in his tone made my throat tighten. Minutes later, my mother called everyone to the yard for a toast. "To my daughter and her husband," she said brightly. "Two people who balance each other perfectly." She handed the floor to Ryan. "Say a few words. You've known her longest." I tried to protest, but he was already standing. "Sure, why not?" he said, glass in hand. He looked at me and smiled. "Nadia's always been a force. She never settles, not for jobs, not for people." The crowd chuckled. "Eli, you've got yourself a handful. Trust me, I should know." The laughter turned uneasy. Eli's eyes darkened. "That's enough," he said quietly. Ryan smirked. "Relax. It's a joke." Eli stood. "You've had your fun. Sit down." Ryan took a step closer, still smiling but sharper now. "You gonna make me?" Everything blurred. I saw Eli's hand twitch, his jaw tighten, and then Ryan muttered something under his breath. Something I couldn't fully hear but knew was meant to wound. And then it happened. A sudden movement, a sharp sound. Ryan's fist connected with Eli's face. The room erupted, gasps, shouts, a glass breaking. Eli stumbled back, holding his jaw. For a moment, no one moved. I shouted his name, rushing forward. Mark, his brother, grabbed Ryan, pulling him away. My mother screamed, "He didn't mean it!" Eli straightened slowly, blood at the corner of his mouth. He didn't swing back. He just looked at Ryan, eyes steady, voice low. "You really haven't changed." Ryan laughed once, bitter. "Ask your wife why I did it," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. The words froze the crowd. I felt the air leave my lungs. Eli's eyes turned to me, searching, waiting for an answer I didn't have ready. My mouth opened, but nothing came out. Lena's hand touched my arm. "Say something," she whispered. But I couldn't. I just stood there as the whispers started, as Ryan was led out, as Eli wiped his mouth and turned away. The backyard lights flickered overhead, and for the first time all night, I realized how dark it had gotten. Eli walked past me without a word, through the crowd, through the doorway, disappearing into the house. Everyone stared at me, my mother shaking her head, friends whispering. I tried to tell myself it wasn't my fault, that Ryan had crossed the line, that Eli would calm down. But deep down, I knew something irreversible had just happened. Not because of the punch, but because of the question that followed it. One I couldn't answer, not honestly, not anymore. The flashing red and blue lights from the police car painted our yard in colorless streaks. Guests huddled near the driveway, whispering. Someone had called the police. Maybe Lena, maybe Mark. Ryan sat on the curb, a towel pressed to his split knuckle, smirking like it was all some wild misunderstanding. Eli was inside, icing his jaw, refusing to look at anyone. When the officers asked me what happened, my voice shook. He hit him out of nowhere," I said. Ryan laughed softly behind me. "That's not what she told me earlier," he muttered. I turned on him. "Don't twist this." He smiled. "I'm not twisting anything, Nadia. I'm just telling the truth." The officer looked between us. "You two know each other?" "She's my ex," Ryan said easily. "Old friends." The word friends sounded like a weapon. Inside, Mark helped Eli to the couch. His cheek had started to swell, but his eyes stayed calm. "You don't need to talk to him," Mark said. "I'll handle the report." Eli didn't answer. He just kept holding the ice pack to his face, staring straight ahead. I stood in the doorway, unsure if I should approach. "Eli," I whispered. "Are you okay?" He turned his head slightly. "You should probably go talk to your friend. He seems to need you more." The words cut deeper than I expected. "That's not fair." He looked at me then, quiet but sharp. Neither was tonight. By the time the police finished, Ryan had been escorted away, still talking, still smirking. "You'll call me, right?" he said to me before they shut the door of the patrol car. "You owe me that much." I stood frozen on the lawn, surrounded by guests pretending not to stare. Marianne came up behind me, whispering, "He must have had a reason. Ryan's not violent." Something set him off. "Mom, stop." She lowered her voice. "Well, maybe if Eli hadn't provoked him." "Mom!" I snapped. "Enough!" Her face fell. "I'm just saying, don't ruin your life defending someone who never understood you." I couldn't even answer. I went back inside, closing the door on all of them. Eli was gone. His wallet and keys were missing from the counter. I called him once, twice, no answer. On the third try, it went straight to voicemail. Lena came in quietly. "He left about 10 minutes ago," she said. "Said he needed space." I nodded, but my throat burned. Ryan's ruined everything. Lena's eyes softened. "Ryan didn't do this alone, Nadia." I looked at her defensive. "You're blaming me?" "I'm saying you gave him room to do it." I wanted to shout, to argue, but the words stuck. She squeezed my shoulder gently and left. The next morning, the police called asking if Eli wanted to press charges. I didn't know how to answer. "He's not here," I said. Later that afternoon, I drove to the hospital where they'd taken him overnight for observation. He was sitting in a quiet waiting area, paperwork in his hand. When he saw me, his face didn't change. You didn't have to come, he said. I wanted to. He nodded toward the empty chair beside him. You can sit if you want, but there's nothing to say. There's a lot to say, I said quickly. Ryan's lying. I didn't. He cut me off. He told the cops you let him on. I froze. That's not true. Eli's gaze didn't waver. Did you tell him you missed him? What? No, maybe something like that months ago, but not like that. He exhaled slowly. Nadia, that's exactly like that. Tears stung my eyes. It was a joke, Eli. He kept asking if I ever thought about us, and I said something stupid to end the conversation. He shook his head. You always say it's a joke when it goes too far. I wanted to reach for his hand, but he stood up before I could. They released me, he said. Mark's driving me home. Home? I asked. Ours? He looked at me for a long time. Not anymore. Then he walked past me, calm as ever, leaving me standing there with my mouth open and my excuses crumbling. I sat down hard in the plastic chair. A nurse passed by, asking if I was okay. I nodded, though I wasn't sure. The lights above buzzed quietly, the air too cold. When I finally drove home, his things were already gone. Not everything, just enough. The clothes he wore most often, his toiletries, his laptop. On the kitchen counter sat his wedding ring, placed neatly beside a folded piece of paper. We'll handle the rest through lawyers, it said. My mother called that evening, voice sharp. You can't let him make you the villain, she said. Say he's overreacting. Men always calm down eventually. I almost believed her, but then I saw my reflection in the dark window, tired eyes, shaky hands, a face I barely recognized. He won't, I said quietly. Not this time. The doorbell rang just after sunset. When I opened it, a police officer handed me a document, Ryan's statement, along with a note about a possible restraining order. My stomach dropped. Ma'am, the officer said, your husband confirmed his own separate filing today. I nodded dumbly, signing where he told me. When he left, I sank to the floor, papers scattered around me. Ryan's words echoed in my head. Ask your wife why I did it. For the first time, I understood what Eli had seen all along. It wasn't the punch that destroyed everything. It was the slow unraveling of trust, one boundary at a time, until nothing was left to hold on to. When the house finally went dark that night, I sat at the table staring at the empty space where Eli's ring had been. The silence felt heavier than any argument we'd ever had. I thought about calling him, explaining, begging, but I knew what he'd say. He'd tell me I'd already said enough, and he'd be right. The following week felt like a blur of rumors, phone calls, and long stretches of silence that made my head buzz. Word about the fight spread faster than I could react. People from work texted me things like, "Are you okay?" and "Heard something crazy happened." My inbox filled with polite concern that really meant curiosity. I told everyone the same story. It was a misunderstanding. Ryan overreacted. Eli was fine. The more I repeated it, the less I believed it. HR asked to have a conversation. When I sat down in the conference room, the air smelled faintly of coffee and toner. My manager cleared his throat. There's been some chatter about an incident involving one of our contractors, Mr. Vale, he said carefully. We just need to ensure there's no ongoing conflict of interest. I forced a smile. There isn't. He's an old friend who misunderstood boundaries. He nodded, writing something in his notes. We'll be suspending future collaboration with him, effective immediately. I should have felt relieved, but instead I felt stripped, like they'd just erased the part of my job that made me feel valuable. The meeting ended quickly. No one said the word reputation, but it hung in the air as I left. At home, my phone kept lighting up with messages from my mother. Don't talk to reporters, one said. I laughed bitterly. There were no reporters, just neighbors pretending to care. That evening, I posted a long message online, something about, miscommunication, and forgiveness. I didn't mention names, but everyone knew. The comments were divided, half sympathetic, half cruel. Lena texted me, "Delete that. You're making it worse." I ignored her. Eli still hadn't called. I tried once just to hear his voice. It went straight to voicemail. I left a message anyway. "I know you hate me right now, but I never meant to hurt you. Please call." He never did. 2 days later, a courier knocked on my door with an envelope addressed in neat handwriting. Inside were 2 documents, a petition for divorce and a restraining order forbidding contact with Ryan. The letter from his lawyer was short. "My client wishes to proceed amicably and without further discussion." I sat on the couch staring at the papers until the light changed in the room. The sun dipped low, the shadows lengthened, and still I didn't move. It wasn't the legal language that broke me. It was the word amicably. He didn't even hate me. He was just done. Mom came over when she heard. She stormed through the door like she was arriving for battle. "This is ridiculous," she said, waving the papers. "He's humiliating you to save face." "He's protecting himself," I said quietly. She scoffed. "He's weak. Always has been." I looked at her and, for the first time, didn't agree. "No, Mom. He's the only one strong enough to walk away." That silenced her for once. The next morning, I tried to go into the office like nothing was wrong. People stared. Someone whispered near the elevator, "She's the one whose ex punched her husband." I pretended not to hear, smiled, and said good morning anyway. My reflection in the glass looked unfamiliar, too polished for someone whose life had just fallen apart. Lena found me by the coffee machine. "You should take some time off," she said gently. "Everyone's talking." "I can handle it," I said. "You shouldn't have to," she replied. "And you shouldn't still be defending Ryan even indirectly." "I'm not defending him," I snapped. "I'm just explaining context." She sighed. "Context doesn't erase consequences." That hit me harder than I expected. I wanted to tell her she didn't understand, but I knew she did. She'd warned me months ago. By the weekend, Ryan's wife filed for separation. It was all over social media. A mutual acquaintance tagged me in a comment, asking if I had something to do with it. My hands shook as I deleted the tag. Mom kept calling, her advice turning bitter. "If you'd kept your distance from that man, none of this would have happened," she said one night. "Now look at you, alone and humiliated." "Thanks for the reminder," I muttered. "You're not the villain here, Nadia," she insisted. "People just love seeing a woman fall." But deep down, I knew I wasn't a victim of gossip. I was the author of it. Every small decision, every justification, every time I'd laughed off a boundary, it all led here. That Sunday, Mark showed up unannounced. He stood in the doorway, polite but firm. "Eli asked me to drop this off." He handed me a small box, his wedding band, the one I'd left behind at the hospital. I stared at it, my throat tight. He could have mailed it. "He didn't want it in the mail," Mark said. "He wanted you to know he's serious." "Did he say anything else?" Mark hesitated. "Just that he hopes you find peace." I nodded, trying to hold back tears. "He sounds calm." "He is," Mark said. "That's the worst part." After he left, I sat on the floor with the ring in my hand. It was cool against my skin, weightless and final. I remembered the night he slipped it on my finger, how certain we both were, how safe I felt. Now it was just metal. Later that night, I saw an email from my boss. "Given recent events, we'll be pausing your involvement with client-facing projects." It wasn't termination, but it was close enough. I laughed, quiet, tired laughter that didn't sound like me. For the first time, I didn't blame Ryan or Eli or anyone else, just myself. Every excuse I'd made, every harmless conversation, every time I'd chosen to be admired instead of accountable. I placed Eli's ring on the table beside the divorce papers. The two glinted in the lamplight like proof of how far I'd fallen. Outside, the world moved on. Cars passing, dogs barking, life continuing. And I realized that Eli's silence wasn't cruelty. It was closure. His revenge wasn't loud or bitter. It was calm, legal, and absolute. He didn't need to raise his voice or his hand. He'd simply stopped waiting for me to understand. I picked up the pen lying beside the papers, ready to sign where I was told. The lines seemed to stretch endlessly across the page. I hesitated only once before writing my name. It felt like signing away a story that had already ended weeks ago. When I was done, I whispered to the empty room, "He's finally free." Then, quieter, "And so am I think." But the silence didn't agree. The house felt smaller once the papers were gone. I mailed them back that morning, watched the clerk stamp the envelope, and stood there for a moment waiting to feel something. Relief, anger, anything. Nothing came. By the time I got home, the air inside was stale, heavy with the faint scent of candles from nights I'd tried too hard to pretend things were fine. I cleaned because I didn't know what else to do. I scrubbed the counters, folded laundry, rearranged the shelves. Everything I touched reminded me of him, his coffee mug, the spare charger he always left on the kitchen island, even the quiet way he used to whistle while washing dishes. I wanted to hate those small reminders, but I didn't. They made the house feel alive again, if only for seconds. In the afternoon, I sat at the table staring at my phone. Eli hadn't posted anything since the night of the fight. No photos, no updates, not even a hint of how he was living now. I opened his page every day like a ritual, hoping for a sign that he missed me. There wasn't one. The silence said enough. Mom called again, asking if I'd heard from the lawyers. I told her it was final. She paused, then said, "Maybe it's for the best. You two were suffocating each other." I wanted to argue, but she wasn't entirely wrong. Still, hearing her sound so casual about the collapse of my marriage made me ache in a way I hadn't expected. "He didn't suffocate me, Mom," I said quietly. "He just stopped trying to breathe next to me." She didn't answer. We said goodbye, and I turned off my phone. That evening, I decided to return the last of his things. A jacket, a box of books, some photos he'd left behind. I drove to his mother's house and sat outside for 10 minutes before going up. Ruth opened the door, her expression neutral but not unkind. "You can leave them here," she said, pointing to the porch. I nodded and set the box down. "Is he okay?" I asked. She hesitated. "He's fine, focused on work, spending time with family." "Does he ever talk about me?" Ruth looked at me for a long moment. "Not anymore." The words hit harder than I thought they would. I nodded again, whispering, "Tell him I'm sorry." She sighed. "You already told him that 100 different ways. He just stopped listening." When I got back in the car, I saw a small shape in the window. Anna, their niece, waving. For a second, I thought it was Eli watching, but it wasn't. Still, my heart jumped before sinking back down again. That night, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat at the table, the same table where he used to wait for me. I lit one candle out of habit. The flame flickered softly, reflecting in the glass like a heartbeat. For the first time, the house didn't feel angry. It just felt empty. I scrolled through my phone again, landing on a video from our last vacation. We were on the beach, laughing, wind tangled in my hair. Eli had turned the camera toward me and said, "You'll never stop needing control, will you?" I'd laughed back, "Someone has to drive." Now, watching it, I realized I'd driven us right off a cliff and still blamed him for not holding on tighter. The next morning, a letter arrived from HR confirming my transition out of client-facing roles. I stared at the words, tracing the lines with my finger. My entire life, career, marriage, reputation, had been reduced to phrases written in careful professional language. Amicable termination, personal leave, mutual decision. I placed the letter beside the stack of unopened mail on the counter and made myself coffee. The smell filled the room but didn't make it warmer. Every sound echoed. The drip of the machine, the hum of the fridge, the faint creak of the floorboards. Around noon, I went outside to water the plants. Across the street, a couple was unloading groceries, laughing over something small. The sight made my chest tighten. I used to think happiness was something you could rebuild, like a house after a storm. But standing there in the sunlight, I realized some storms don't leave foundations. They just wipe everything clean. Later that day, Mark texted me. Eli asked me to make sure you got everything you needed from the house. He won't be returning. I stared at the message for a long time before typing back, yes. Tell him thank you. I deleted it before sending. As evening fell, I cooked dinner out of habit, 2 portions, before remembering there was no one to share it with. I left one plate on the counter anyway, maybe for the ghost of the life I'd had. The candle from last night was still half burned, wax pooling unevenly around the wick. I lit it again. I thought about that night at the party, the punch, the silence, the way everyone looked at me after Ryan's words. For so long, I'd blamed that moment for destroying everything. Now I knew it wasn't the explosion that ended us. It was the quiet years of erosion before it. Every time I'd dismissed Eli's discomfort, every time I'd chosen to be admired instead of honest, every time I'd said, it's just a joke, the punch was only the echo. When the clock hit midnight, I opened the window and let the cool air in. Somewhere in the distance, someone laughed. It sounded warm, alive, ordinary. I whispered into the darkness, I didn't mean for it to end like this. The candle flickered lower. I stared at the empty chair across from me, the one that used to hold a man patient enough to wait for me to grow up. He had waited, I realized, just not forever. I picked up the empty wine glass, tilted it against the light, and said softly, he hit you, but I broke us. The words hung in the air, quiet and final. I blew out the candle before it burned out completely, and the room fell into darkness. The smoke curled upward, fading into nothing. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you don't miss the next story. Write in the comments from which city you are watching.